What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about what it's really like living in Quebec. So I thought this would be a really interesting video to take a look at because as far as Canada goes, I think I understand, or I could at least survive in most places in Canada, I think. But Quebec just sounds like a whole different kind of beast, you know? Everything is French, and the culture there is way different from standard Canadian culture. So today, I just really want to check out this video. This is actually by a fellow American who lived in Quebec, and they are going to talk about some of the things that really stuck out to them, some of the biggest differences that they noticed living in Quebec and just what it's like. So let's take a look.
So my favorite part about being in Quebec was the multicultural part of it, mainly because I got to taste food from around the world.
Oh, the food! And here I thought they were like making some kind of statement like, I loved meeting all the diverse people. I love the different multicultural experiences. Like, no, the food, man. The food. I love the food. Eating. Yes. Very American answer. I can relate to this. Okay. Food. All right.
I had Sri Lankan food. I had, Northern Indian food. I had Southern Indian food. One of them was more spicy than the other. I don't remember which one.
What?
Delicious. And,
okay. This is interesting that there's a lot of different multicultural food available in Quebec. Like all around Quebec, or like a specific part? Because, it's an entire province. It's a pretty big place, right? And what about like the French food, right? Like doesn't Quebec have French Canadian food like poutine, right?
I got, Chinese food from Chinatown. Amazing.
Okay.
Mexican food and El Salvadorian food and like all of these different like countries. I got fufu from Africa. You
Really?
get the classic potatoes and beef.
I've heard that Canada in general is a lot more multicultural than the United States, just in general. I didn't know Quebec had all these different places and representation and foods, and it's really cool.
I ate moose.
Moose?
I thought it was beef. So they served us this meat, and I look at it, and
What?
I just assumed that it was a steak. I thought it was beef.
What?
And so I start to eat it, and it tastes kind of funny.
Huh? I don't know about this Quebec anymore. I'm just kidding. But moose? I didn't know anybody ate moose meat. Is that a Quebec thing? Or like a Canada thing? Because us Americans, we really associate moose with Canada, as you might know. I don't know, a little confused here. And this person was like unwittingly eating the moose. It wasn't even on purpose.
And
was it good?
I didn't say anything. I'm not going to say anything. This is my first area. I'm not going to say anything. so I just ate it. It was like, beef tasted kind of weird, but that was okay.
Okay.
It wasn't until like a few weeks later that my companion notified me of what I ate.
Oh.
And he said that was orignal, which is moose.
Wow.
And so I was very surprised. I said,
Okay.
that makes a lot more sense now.
This is not, I'm going to be honest, this is not what I expected. Like, What is it like living in Quebec? We're talking about eating moose.
Why? It did not taste like beef. There's always French food. You get cheese and breads are very cheap up there, which
nice.
is really nice.
Cheese. Okay, here we go. French stuff. Cheese and bread. Simple, but sounds very effective. It actually sounds like something I'd really enjoy.
Cheaper. I mean, it's not as cheap as in France, so I've heard, but it's cheaper than here for like really like designer cheeses and like good, delicious cheeses.
Oh, fancy cheese. Now we're talking. Forget all this multicultural world experiences, appreciating cultures. Forget that. Cheese. You got fancy cheeses at affordable prices.
So the food was great. I don't think I'd ever tasted like fresh, real baklava before, but that's delicious. And there's also another
I've heard of that. I don't know what baklava is.
place in Ottawa. Ottawa is great, by the way, for food because there's these things called food trucks, and I've seen a couple of them around here.
Ottawa is not in Quebec, right? This American is like this. This is who they got for the interview about what it's like living in Quebec, and we're talking about Ottawa. I don't know. There's a lot of video left, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool insights into life in Quebec. But so far I've gotten that you eat moose, it's multicultural, there's fancy cheese. We're talking about Ottawa. Isn't that in Ontario, I thought?
Provo, but in Ottawa, they're all over the place. There's all these food trucks. In one of my areas, there's a Greek family, and they fed us a Greek salad with real Greek olives, like from Greece, with the seed inside.
Wow.
And it was the most delicious salad that I've ever eaten in my life. It was
wow. Yeah, I've heard that Quebec City, which is in Quebec, is like the most European city in North America, right? And from what they're saying here, it kind of sounds that way with Greek olives and all that.
So good. It was Gouda cheese and like all of this other like cucumber chunks and tomato chunks. It was so delicious. Okay. So cool. Yummy. In general, there's pretty much not a lot of danger. It's very westernized as far as crime goes. I mean, there's a lot of drugs on the streets of the big cities, and even a lot of the little cities have lots and lots of drugs. Because
oh my god, it's just the way that they said that. Like, I'm not even here to like judge about the drugs on the streets of Quebec's cities and towns. That's literally like they said. That's anywhere. Like any big cities or smaller cities are going to have some amount of drugs or crime. Although this American said they felt very safe in Quebec. Like I don't know the crime statistics, but it's probably safer than a lot of areas of the United States. Now we're talking about drugs.
It's cold and there's not very much sun throughout the year. It's a very hard place to live because people get depressed really easily from that.
Oh my god. I'm not trying to make this video like a criticism of Quebec, but we're just kind of laying out the facts, I guess, here. Has great food, some amount of drugs, low crime, cold, difficult because it's cold, especially for Americans, I would think. Quebec is pretty far north, right? I'm trying to think of the Canadian map. Quebec is pretty far north. Way colder, way more intense winter than anything we experience in the United States. So maybe that's normal for Quebecois. I think it'd be a very, very difficult adjustment for Americans. That's what it sounds like.
And so there's a lot of healthcare and people just not being able to handle it and stuff like that. So
wow,
that's something that
some people just have trouble coping with like the cold or dark and stuff. I see.
You'll run into. So in Quebec, there's a, I mean, it's a huge immigration destination, and so we had a lot
Oh.
of Middle Easterners, we had a lot of Egyptians at the time because
Oh, wow.
Egypt was kind of in a.
Talk about people and cultures, races and ethnicities. You don't see this in the United States. Like, all right, maybe like in our big cities. Excuse me, my nose is killing me. Ah, there we go. I'm sure Quebec wants me to step foot in your province after this. Wiping my nose. Anyway, excuse me. Sorry. My nose has been itching. Oh my. I was going to make some kind of drug joke there, but let's keep things moving along. Yeah, the idea that it's very multicultural and there's people from all over the world and a lot of them, a lot of immigration. This is like you just don't see that. In the United States, in most average cities and towns, it's mostly white people, for lack of a better way to say it.
In a scary moment, and so we had lots of refugees and lots of Africans. There's quite a big English community in and around Montreal. Everywhere outside of that, it's French, but just close to Montreal, the island, it's very English because
Oh,
it's a great place to have a business, and so people will come from the United States and live there to do business there.
really? There's like some small pockets of English speaking areas in Quebec. I had no idea about that. That's interesting.
And so they keep it English so that they don't have to learn French. Anyways, there's a big
Okay.
English community, and it almost feels sort of oppressed. They sort of feel like they're oppressed from the French people because, and I mean, me personally, I feel like it was just. Oh, I think I hit the microphone. Me personally, I feel like it's a misunderstanding, really, because I mean, the French really they want to keep their French, and so they see the English as a threat, and so it sort of just happens that way that they feel that way towards each other, and it's.
Well, French Canadians are like a minority in Canada, right? And you guys work really hard to have your representation in the Canadian government. And like from what I've learned, Quebec and French Canadians have worked really, really hard to try to preserve the French Canadian culture and keep the French language like vibrant and strong and used. So he this person used the word like oppressed or something, or maybe a better word would be like protective. Like and neither of us Americans can speak for French Canadians and how you guys really feel, but that's what I would guess.
And it's gotten pretty heated before, like including like armed, military or policemen on the borders between the French and the English
What?
provinces, and so
What?
that's just that's one aspect of the culture that you'll run into there. And
Wow.
there's a huge Hispanic community in there. There's a huge Jewish community in there.
Really?
Montreal was actually founded by the Irish. There's still a lot of loyalty to the Queen,
Okay.
which is interesting. I think it's cool. My grandparents are English, so I'm still sort of loyal to the Queen. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So the accents are.
I don't think British or royalty or queens really mean anything too meaningful to Americans. Like for us, it's kind of a novelty. Like, oh, a queen, king. That's fun.
Are very different. And in France, for example, you would say,
Oh, so they're saying French Canada and France in Europe are different, which is surprising for a lot of Americans to hear. Like, why would these two different French places be so different? But apparently they really are.
If you wanted to say, what are you doing here? You would say, qu'est-ce que tu fais ici? Very, very proper, like, qu'est-ce que tu fais ici? Or even like, qu'est-ce que tu fais ici? That's more like Swiss. But anyways,
Okay.
I'm not very good at the accent. But in Quebec, it sounds more like, ça que tu fais ici?
What?
Very different.
That's completely different.
And it's you can find where that would, sort of come in.
No, I don't understand what they're talking about. Where that would come in, I don't know where that comes from. Apparently, French in Quebec is very different from French in France. Completely different words in some cases.
Like sec is in qu'est-ce que tu fais? Sec tu fais, and then ici, like in France they say ici, and then in Quebec when they're really angry they put a T at the end for no reason. It just sounds meaner, I guess. So it's ici. But the word for outside is.
Oh my God, French Canadians out there, if you're watching, is this accurate? Is this like an accurate, correct analysis? I'm curious.
Dehors. It's like Dehors, but it sounds like dehors. And so, but when they're really angry, they will say dehors.
Oh my God.
And they'll put a W in it for some reason.
You just add sounds and letters to portray anger. That's really interesting, actually, as far as like language goes.
This lady was very mad at us, and I don't know how I didn't laugh when she said that, but afterwards we laughed a little bit. Da wow. She was like, da wow. I remember one of my companions, some guy was telling them how to speak Quebecois French, and he said, well, it's a good way to start a sentence is with ben, and a good way to end a sentence is with le. So, which is, I mean,
ben?
Not like every single sentence, but like you'll find that's very common. They'll be like ben je sais pas là,
ben. What is the equivalent to that in English? Like or like I don't know, like ben est-ce que tu veux something like that.
Ben ça que tu fais ici là, and like that was the one I used earlier. Did you catch it? Ben, ça que tu fais ici, là. That is the syntax of a Quebecois sentence. So, yeah, swear words in France are normal French swear words. They don't mean anything. They were probably made up words or something like that. In Quebec, all of their swear words are religious words.
Oh,
and so like when somebody screams baptism, they don't want to get baptized.
What?
They're actually cursing.
What? Why? What? How? Where did this come from? Swear words in Quebec are religious words? What's that about?
So, yeah. So watch out for that. Be careful when you say. Religious words around people.
Oh my
Make
God.
sure that it's in context and very clear that you're the worst part is that like the very worst word that you could say, and I'll use the English word so that I don't swear, is tabernacle. If you say that in that in Quebec,
what?
It's equivalent to using the F word.
What? I understand that. Sure, in Quebecois French, it's your own language. You can do what you want. Okay. It's just like, why are religious words swear words? Why?
I think the person is a Quebecois, and then the accent is called joual.
Joual.
So people from Lac Saint Jean, they have a very strong joual, and so they'll say like a normal person would say Je suis allé fetcher la vache, which means I went out to fetch the cow.
Okay.
And somebody from Lac Saint Jean would say it more like, "Je suis allé faire la vache." And it's very, and imagine that with no teeth.
So within Quebec, there are different accents. Just like within the United States, there are different accents. We all speak English, but it's different accents. Yeah, I get it.
It's even worse. And so they'll use the word flat tire, and that's a French word in Quebec. And they'll say,
Flat tire.
J'ai un flat tire.
Flat tire.
That's the accent that they use. They even use an English R when they say it, but they think that it's French sometimes. Like, I've heard a story of somebody.
This is the most random analysis of what it's like living in Quebec. Truly, the most flat tire. I can speak Quebec French. Flat tire.
Coming up and saying, comment dit flat tire en anglais, which means how do you say flat tire in English? And that's an English word. It's flat tire. He's like, no, that's not English. And he's just very confused. He thought that was a French word.
That's funny.
And so, like, we'll say, and sometimes it's that way, but sometimes it's the other way around, because they'll say, like, they'll use very old French sometimes. So in France, like, a car is a voiture, une voiture. That's a car.
Okay.
But in Quebec, sometimes they'll refer to a car as a cart.
Cart.
They'll say, like,
a cart.
Le char. And in France, even the stop signs,
like pushing around a cart, an old cart at some kind of street market or something 1,000 years ago.
They stop. They invented a word, stopper.
Stopper.
That's in France. Stopper. And they also invented the word parking.
Huh.
Interesting. But in Quebec, you don't park the car. C'est pas le parking. It's not parking. It's stationner. You stationize. I don't know how to say it. But you can't say parking, and you don't use voiture as a car. You say char. Mostly in car terms, they'll use a lot of English words like il faut checker l'huile. You have to check the oil. Checker. That's a verb in French, I guess.
Okay. And there you have it. That's what it's like living in Quebec, according to an American. This is interesting. To be honest, I was kind of hoping for a little more in-depth and a little more general, maybe touching on some more topics about what general life in Quebec is like, but this American's perspective was interesting, and the things that they chose to talk about were interesting. A lot about the Quebec language, a little bit about what Quebecois people are like, a lot about the food and the experience, and the diversity and the multiculturalism there, and a lot, yeah, like I said, a lot about the language. So it's pretty interesting, actually. I definitely learned some things about Quebec culture. So for that reason, I quite enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, especially if you've ever been to Quebec or if you are from Quebec. Be awesome to hear your thoughts about a lot of these things. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and learning about Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.